Hello, guys. Today, we're discussing something interesting: city buildings and architecture.
All right, I'm ready. It's always fun to think about how buildings shape cities.
Exactly. Actually, architecture has a huge influence on how we live in cities.
Yes, it's amazing how buildings can change the look of a city. What's your favorite building?
I'm a fan of the Eiffel Tower. It's so iconic and really represents Paris, don't you think?
That's true. In theory, a building like the Eiffel Tower can define an entire city.
Actually, the Eiffel Tower was supposed to be a temporary structure, but now it's permanent.
That's fascinating. And in New York City, the Empire State Building is also a huge symbol.
Yes, it was the tallest building in the world for over 40 years, until the World Trade Center.
In theory, tall buildings like these show how cities are always evolving. Isn't that cool?
It really is. Actually, the use of steel and glass in skyscrapers was a huge game-changer in architecture.
Yes. And look at cities like Dubai now. Their modern buildings, like the Burj Khalifa, are extraordinary.
Actually, the Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world. It's an engineering marvel.
So in theory, modern architecture pushes the limits of what's possible. What do you think about that?
I agree. Actually, it's amazing to see how technology and design can create such structures.
Yes. And when we think about bridges, like the Golden Gate Bridge, it's another example of smart design.
The Golden Gate Bridge is beautiful. Actually, its color stands out so well against the fog.
Yes, and it's not just about how the bridge looks. It's also about its function and connection.
In theory, bridges like the Golden Gate help people move between different areas of a city.
It's true. And the Sydney Opera House is a perfect example of combining art with functionality.
That's a great point. Actually, the design of the Opera House is inspired by sails on the water.
Yes, it's one of the most recognizable buildings in the world. It's so unique and stunning.
Exactly. In theory, the Opera House shows how architecture can merge with nature.
Actually, when you visit cities, it's amazing to see how buildings fit into the natural landscape.
That's true. And architecture doesn't just mean big skyscrapers. Residential homes are important too.
Yes. In theory, homes should be comfortable, not just pretty. Comfort is key.
Actually, that's why minimalistic designs in homes are becoming more popular: clean and simple.
I'm a fan of minimalistic designs. It really creates a calm and relaxing space to live in.
And when we look at old buildings, like those in Europe, they have a timeless charm, don't they?
Yes, like the cathedrals in Europe. They're grand and beautiful, and built to last for centuries.
In theory, the purpose of those buildings was to inspire awe. And they still do today.
Actually, the architecture of old cathedrals with tall spires and stained glass is incredible.
That's right. In theory, the designers of those buildings had such a deep sense of purpose.
And then we have modern structures like the Shard in London, which has such a sleek design.
Actually, the Shard is one of the tallest buildings in Europe. Its sharp lines are so striking.
Yes, It's a good example of how modern architecture embraces innovation and creativity.
And let's not forget the importance of public spaces like parks. Architecture also shapes parks and plazas.
Yes, parks are where people go to relax. A good park design is just as important as a building.
In theory, parks are like the lungs of a city. They provide space for nature in an urban environment.
Actually, many cities are working to create more green spaces. It's good for the environment.
Yes, and a well-designed city means people can live in harmony with the environment.
Exactly. And if we talk about modern cities, there's always this mix of old and new architecture.
That's one of the best things about cities like London and New York, there's such diversity.
Yes. Actually, the contrast between the old and the new buildings is what makes the cities unique.
In theory, the blend of different styles shows how cities grow and evolve over time.
Yes. And each city has its own personality based on the architecture. It's part of the city's identity.
That's so true. Actually, architecture can tell the story of a city's history and culture.
Exactly. And it's fun to explore these buildings because they give you a sense of adventure.
In theory, learning about city buildings helps you connect more with the places you visit.
Yes. And architecture is a huge part of our daily lives, even if we don't always think about it.
Actually, the more we learn about architecture, the more we realize its impact on everything.
In theory, if you understand how buildings are made, you start to see things in a new way.
And that makes learning English easier too. Discussing architecture expands your vocabulary.
Yes, you can use words like skyscraper, archway, or facade to sound more fluent.
Actually, you're right. Discussing topics like architecture unlocks the ability to speak better.
In theory, the more detailed your discussions, the more fluent you become in English.
Yes, and by talking about buildings, you're erasing any doubts you have about using the language.
Exactly. Learning and talking about these topics really helps with becoming fluent.
Actually, the more you practice, the easier it is to express your thoughts clearly.
And when you talk about real-world topics like architecture, you'll truly become fluent in English.
That's right. Fluent in English is a goal for all of us, and it's a journey worth taking.
Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe for more lessons like this.
Overview. Today we've explored architecture, cities, and how they help with learning English.
Hopefully, this was an interesting video for you all. If you have any questions, you can comment.
Yeah, I'm a fan of how architecture really connects with people. Actually, it can change the whole feel of a city.
Exactly. In theory, cities would be very different without these buildings. What do you think?
I agree. Actually, if we didn't have skyscrapers and public spaces, it wouldn't be the same.
Yes. In theory, they help us feel comfortable and settled in our environment. Don't you think?
Definitely. I think people often overlook how architecture can shape our daily lives.
You're right. Buildings like the Colosseum in Rome remind us of the past while still inspiring today.
Actually, ancient structures like that can make us appreciate modern designs even more.
Yes. And it's amazing how some cities have really mixed old and new designs. It's a cool combination.
Absolutely. In theory, architecture is an adventure in itself, always evolving with technology.
Yes. And each city has its own unique vibe. Actually, that's what makes exploring new places exciting.
I agree. And think about how buildings create jobs too. Architects, builders, and engineers all work hard.
Right. In theory, building a city is a complex task, but it's worth it for the end result.
Yes, and having great architecture can also make cities more comfortable to live in.
Actually, I've noticed how good design in buildings can actually make our lives better and easier.
For sure, and it's interesting how the design of a building can tell you so much about the culture.
Exactly. If you look at Tokyo's buildings, you see a blend of tradition and futuristic style.
I'm a fan of how some cities, like New York, are a mix of historical buildings and modern skyscrapers.
Yes, and each building contributes to the personality of the city. It's fascinating.
In theory, architecture shapes the way people move through a city. It's more than just aesthetics.
That's true. Actually, the layout of a city can influence the way people interact with each other.
Yeah, and if you think about it, some buildings are built to encourage social interaction, like plazas.
That's a great point. Public spaces are just as important as buildings in creating a city's atmosphere.
Actually, the best buildings connect with the environment, both natural and human-made.
Yes, the way buildings are integrated into the environment can make them even more impressive.
And some cities are known for their iconic skylines. Think about Chicago's skyline with all the skyscrapers.
That's true. In theory, the skyline of a city is what many people associate with it. It's a visual identity.
Actually, Chicago has some of the best examples of modern architecture in the world.
Yes, and other cities like Barcelona are known for unique styles like Gaudi's work. So inspiring.
Barcelona is one of my favorite cities for architecture. Actually, the buildings there feel like art.
So true. And if you think about it, each building has a purpose beyond its design. It holds history.
Exactly. That's why learning about architecture can give you a deeper understanding of the world.
Yes. In theory, the more we know about these structures, the better we can appreciate them.
And just like the work of architects, the process of learning English can unlock a lot of opportunities.
That's true. The more you learn about different topics, like architecture, the more fluent you become.
Actually, discussing buildings in English is a fun way to expand your vocabulary and grammar.
Yes. And you're constantly learning new words and ways to express yourself. It's great for language skills.
In theory, the more detailed your conversations are, the better you become at speaking English.
That's right. Speaking about real-world topics like this really helps erase any doubts about the language.
Exactly. And by talking about buildings, you're not just learning vocabulary but also context.
Yes. It helps you think more critically about language and how to use it effectively.
Actually, learning about these subjects also helps with speaking more confidently in conversations.
And that's the goal, right? To truly become fluent in English, by engaging in real conversations.
Exactly. Fluent in English is a goal, but it's about being comfortable in a variety of topics.
In theory, discussing different subjects, like architecture, opens up more avenues for fluency.
Yes, and it makes learning English an adventure. You're always exploring new ideas and concepts.
Absolutely. And as you master topics like architecture, it unlocks the ability to speak more freely.
Actually, that's a powerful way to grow your English skills, by engaging deeply with various topics.
I completely agree. And when you make learning fun, like we did today, it's even more rewarding.
Yes. Hopefully this should be an interesting video for all of you. Leave a like if you enjoyed it.
And don't forget to subscribe for more educational content. Let us know what you want next.
If you have any questions, you can comment below. We love hearing from you guys.
Overview. Today we explored architecture, how it shapes cities, and how it can teach English.
Remember, the more we talk about real-world topics, the more we erase any doubts about the language.
So true. By discussing subjects like architecture, you're truly on the path to becoming fluent.
Actually, that's the beauty of learning. Each conversation makes you more confident and fluent.
And don't forget, fluent in English is a goal, and every step you take brings you closer.
Thank you for joining us. Keep learning, and remember that every conversation helps you grow. Bye.